You're listening to Coding Blocks, episode 28. Subscribe to us and leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app.
And visit us at codingblocks.net where you can find show notes, examples, discussion, and more.
And send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments@codingblocks.net. And follow us on Twitter @codingblocks, or head to www.codingblocks.net and find our other social links there at the top of the page. And with that, welcome to Coding Blocks. I'm Alan Underwood.
I'm Joe Zach.
And I'm Michael Outlaw. And this is our first remote recording. So we'll see how well this works out.
Yeah, So me and Outlaw are in the same room, and then Joe Zach is somewhere in sunny Florida.
We're sending smoke signals to him.
That's right.
Can you see that?
No, it's dark now.
Oh,
yeah.
This isn't going to go over well.
All right, so let's kick it off with our news this week. I say it like that. I mean, it's been a while since we recorded. We've been busy, so...
Too long.
Oh, yeah, it has been too long. We were all kind of chomping at the bit to get back to this, so...
Yeah, it's been too long.
Yeah, the first thing we want to talk about are the poll results. So first off, thank you for all of you that went up there and told us how often you wanted to hear us.
And if you haven't, now's your chance. You go to... /poll or /episode 27.
Yep.
So codingblocks.net /episode 27 or codingblocks.net /poll. And, let your voice be heard.
Yeah, so right now we got a pretty tight race between the way that we do it right now to where we release once every 12 weeks.
Yeah. Wait. Once every 12 weeks. Whatever. Get out of here. You know what, though? I still want to go through the results yet, so I'm not sure if we wanted to say that, but what the results were. But I will say this though about some of these, like especially for those that like took the time to write your own result there. It will definitely make it harder to tabulate all of that. But there were some awesome little gems in there, and I'm pretty sure one of you guys, I'm talking to you, Alan, and you, Joe, set some of these up though, because like for example. Someone said, their quote was, anytime I can hear Michael's voice would be awesome.
Yeah, we did not do that, but it was funny.
I don't believe you. And I thought there was another one that was similar along that same vein that was like, but it said sweet voice or something.
No, my absolute favorite was 1 a week, 1 hour long, sweet Jesus.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, no, there were some really good ones in there that were like that, so... I really do appreciate the time, or we appreciate you taking the time to go up there and vote. And like I said, if you haven't, now's your chance. And I think we're going to make this a regular thing. We'll have some different polls and see what happens. Try to put some interesting questions out to you guys and give you guys an opportunity to let your voices be heard.
Yep. So definitely appreciate the time taken to do that.
And speaking of appreciation, wanted to give a big shout out and thanks to DevUp Sam, Corden Web Guy, Ed B, Crycorn2, Kenneth Glish, Oli 724, and there's two names here I'm going to need some help from Outlaw pronouncing.
Oh, Ed B. I got that one. And Corden Web Guy.
Hey, no, I did those.
Oh man, the hard ones.
You get the hard ones.
Well. I guess this first one is Mr. Furley. That one's not so bad, right?
I thought you were going to say Furley.
No, I think I got that one right. And then, oh man, why would you do this to me?
Just go fast.
Berman PGA, right?
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Yeah, maybe.
In Birmingham, Pucka.
Okay.
Actually, that reminds me, I was watching Taj.0 the other night. And by the way, he's from right around here. And there
From
was
Atlanta?
an app. I want to know if you guys had heard of this. It's called Speech Jammer.
No.
And what you do is you plug your headphones into this thing and you kind of hit play and then you try to talk. And it kind of sends this little like feedback loop of your own voice back to you that's supposed to kind of mess with your speech centers in your brain. So it's actually really hard to talk while you're kind of hearing this stuff. So I thought that was kind of funny. It might be a fun little gag, like, get your wife on there and ask her to tell you a story or something, and you just end up sounding ridiculous.
I thought he was trying to give us like some kind of hint about this remote recording setup. That he was like having a hard time because he was hearing himself.
Apparently
No.
not.
I think he's making excuses already. We're like 5 minutes in. He's already like dropping an excuse bucket.
But yeah,
I'm going to drop into the sleep bucket in a minute.
Yeah, no doubt. But seriously, some of these reviews are absolutely fantastic. We got several that said, hey, this is a must add to your podcast collection, or, quickly becoming one of my favorites. So, hey, guys, seriously, thank you very much. We haven't gotten enough of them.
I like the one where Mr. Furley, and he says that we're funny.
We try to be sometimes. And sometimes it just comes across that way anyways. But yeah, keep them coming. We absolutely love and appreciate that you guys take the time to do that. So thank you. Super, super appreciated. The next thing we want to talk about was Build Atlanta.
Yeah, man. That was awesome.
Outlaw's even wearing the shirt right now.
Yeah, coincidentally.
That was so Outlaw and myself went to this all-day event that Microsoft hosted here at the Atlanta Aquarium, and it was very well done, first off. It was...
This is like the on-the-road version of Build.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we didn't actually get to see the HoloLens.
Man, they didn't bring the
we got to
HoloLens.
see pictures of it,
That
but
was
we
so
didn't
ridiculous.
get to touch one or see an actual...
I think everybody there wanted to see it, right? I think that's why half the people showed up to it. But
Is this thing real, though? I mean, is this really going to hit the market?
man,
Personally, I think it's vaporware. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
I don't know,
What's the
dude.
hardware equivalent of vaporware? Whatever that is, that's what that is.
I don't know, dude.
Google Glass.
Well, see, Google Glass actually felt like to me like that really was vaporware, but this thing looks like
but
it
that
has
actually made it
potential.
into the market and people could buy it.
Yeah, now is it in the market anymore?
Well, no, not now. But yeah, whatever. But what I mean
how
though
about
is it
two-thirds
was
of
actually a
anything that's
thing
at-
that people could buy. It was just a ridiculously expensive thing. I'm curious to see if this ever even gets that far though, or is this going to be like the Surface table that you only hear rumors about?
I feel like anything at CES, like if you see it at CES, it's just never going to happen.
But you know what? Here's the thing, though. From my perspective, just looking at this, what they've shown of it, if they can bring the price of this thing down into within reason, let's say within an Xbox One type price range, $500-ish. If they can get it there,
Google Glass was $1,500.
It was
Why do you think
$1,500.
this thing's going to be less?
So think about it like this. Microsoft has been known to take a hit on hardware knowing that they'll make it up on the back end. The Xbox 360 sold at a loss. The Xbox sold at a loss.
Well, that's just how game consoles are done now.
Not always. But the thing is
they're
think about
always.
this. If they can get this in the hands of people and they can monetize a market, because they're going.
The use case for this thing is so small.
I don't know. The thing is, I can't imagine building software for it. That would be incredibly
Here's
difficult.
the problem. Here's the problem. And it doesn't suffer the exact same fate as 3D TVs, but a similar one. And that is that for people in glasses like myself, I'm automatically like, it's probably going to be uncomfortable to wear on top of my glasses, or not, comfortable, or not look correct or something.
Do you need contacts?
Yeah, it's not happening, man.
Yeah, I don't.
Debbie
I don't know.
Downers, gosh.
I don't know, man. It looks really cool to me. Some of the things that I saw that they could do with it. Now, how well it actually works in real interaction, who knows? You can't even see the thing anywhere. But I just can't imagine writing software for it. Could you imagine actually trying to do an augmented reality type thing to where it's, it's not like something on your phone where you point your phone in a direction and it shows you the Wendy's that's the closest, right?
Maybe this should be the next poll. Is HoloLens real? Because
dude, it's real.
No, man, this thing could actually be like a Michael Bay production, right? Just making you think Optimus Prime looked pretty convincing in those movies, right? This could be another one of those.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited about it. I hope it is real, but I mean, we haven't seen one yet. But anyway, I guess back to the show on the Atlanta build. It was really it was a day full of information that I thought was really cool. The approach that Microsoft is now taking to software is it's almost like responsive web design. What I got out of the day's worth of stuff where they have what was called WP
F.
No, not WPF. It was the Oh, God, why can I not remember what it was right now? But basically, they're bringing the entire platform all together. So you'll be able to write a piece of software that could run on something from a Raspberry Pi to a Windows Phone to a Windows tablet to the desktop. Like they're trying to unify the experience.
I mean, they've been touting that for years, though.
They have, but now they're actually forcing it all through the same programming model, which is a cool thing.
Back in the day, C had this grand vision that you could write your C code on, one time and run it anywhere too.
Well, Java also.
And then Java came along with a similar promise, and Microsoft's been saying a similar thing with like, hey, write your universal app. I mean, I get it. It's cool. There's some stuff out there. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but you can tell that they're definitely feeling pressure from, Apple and Google. Especially in the mobile market, but
yeah, and
there was some really cool stuff there. But one thing too is just like the expense of it, though.
Oh God,
like that whole day was covered.
Yeah, I mean we didn't pay for parking, we didn't pay for food, and dude, they rented out the entire ballroom of the Atlanta Aquarium, so it was not a cheap event. And I mean they want people to get excited about what they've got going on. And I will say this, as a .NET developer, it is exciting, but it would be way more exciting if they had, a ton of mobile users or, something along that line. Because right now, still, like if you're going to write an application, you're writing it for Windows, right? You're not really going to be writing it for the Windows Phone. Now, the one cool part is
if you're going to write a mobile app, you're going to write it for iOS first.
That's what I'm saying. But here's the cool part, right? Like, let's just say if this thing happens, and this is what they're saying, Windows 10 is going to be a part of this universal platform that they're doing. If you can write it for Windows, and then for essentially free, it will scale down to a phone and a tablet and the Internet of Things devices, that could be cool, right? Like now you have buy-in to a platform, and you didn't really have to work at it because... Like you just said,
you're not going to any application you're going to write for a Raspberry Pi isn't going to be something that you're going to be interested in on your phone.
No. What I'm saying is you write a core for your desktop app, and now let's say it's a business layer or something like that, or you layer your application properly. That now becomes available across all devices. Yeah, you're not going to write a desktop application that's going to translate perfectly to a phone. But it is cool that you could have that same core be a part of it, right?
I got 2 words for you that came out of that event.
What was that?
Data lake.
That was cool.
Data lake? What's that?
It was, honestly, I don't even know. There were some, Azure announcements that were made there too, and like one of them was this new data lake service for dealing with gobs of data, but. I couldn't help but like laugh when I heard the name because it just sounded kind of humorous. And then, there was the image of the dump truck spilling trash everywhere, and I just kind of thought of that as like, here comes the data truck coming to get your data to take it to the data lake. Yeah,
man, there was all
and code was the most disappointing part of it for me,
like the massive text editor that is code.
So at the original build event, they announced code, and then I guess I misunderstood its purpose because I was thinking like, hey, this is a cool new IDE that they're creating to be cross-platform. But at the build event in Atlanta, they were very careful. Every time they mentioned it, they referred to it as an editor.
Yeah,
they never once talked to it because even in my own experience, like as soon as it was talked about, I was like, oh, let me go download this thing and start playing with it and see if I can write some code. Like let me just write a simple Hello World app and compile it and watch it run or debug it or whatever. And you try to bring up a task order and you're like, hey, do a build, and it's like, okay, yeah, configure that, and you're like, no, you should already know how to do the build. And
it seems like a Sublime competitor, Notepad++.
Well, yeah, maybe. But, and they at one point during the presentation in Atlanta, they mentioned that you could do compiles for what was it? It had to be a mono-specific project in order to compile only on Linux and OS X. So I've been playing around with this on a Windows 8 box, and that explains why I couldn't do any kind of compile with it.
Well, it does say, like on their site, code.visualstudio.com, that it has an integrated debugging experience.
Yes, for JavaScript.
Oh.
Yeah. So if you wanted to write C# on it, right, and then compile it, you have to be on something other than Windows, which means B, it's a mono project. Because at the moment, they haven't released their own
core.
Yeah, non-Windows based .NET platform or runtime.
That's really that's interesting. I mean, okay. So I will say this: if you throw it into the camp with Sublime, that is still pretty cool, right? I mean,
but then what's it buying you though? That's
free.
The disappointing part.
It's free.
Oh my god! So you can download Sublime and use it forever for free, and it'll let you. And Notepad's out there. I'm not saying that you should. I mean, give them a few bucks,
right?
But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm fairly certain that this is based on Atom, which is another free editor.
Yeah, Atom is. I don't know. Is it based on Atom? I really don't know.
Fairly certain it is.
Well, either which way, I mean, they did talk about it, but it wasn't a huge part of Build. I mean, Build, they showed some stuff with Azure that was really cool. Like some of the analytics you get if you're hooked up into their services. I mean, they were walking through, like, I mean, if you were in love with statistics and you like to analyze every bit of everything that happens, like, you can see all kinds of cool stuff on their dashboards in Azure. I mean, the unified platform was one of their big selling points, and that was mostly using WPF and XAML, right? Was it WPF or was it just XAML? I know that they were talking about things, but it was similar to responsive design because you had things like saying, hey, if the screen width is 1024 or less, then switch to this mode. So I
think that's pretty exciting. Like for a while there, we were kind of afraid that maybe they were going to be getting away from XAML because they kind of killed off Silverlight and were promoting HTML and JavaScript. But it looks like it's still in there.
Actually, not only is it still in there, it seems to be the focus for.
Yeah, it's definitely. If there's ever any question as to like what was the future for XAML, it seems like it's not going away anytime soon.
It's pretty much the predominant for creating your UI stuff. So that was really cool. But
just
again,
to go back to the data lake, though, to give you a more like definition of it, Microsoft touts it as a hyperscale repository for big data analytic workloads. So now you know what it means. It's clear as mud. No fixed size on file limits or account size. It's based on a Hadoop distributed file system. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, they also said some ridiculous statistic there that didn't make much sense. Like some massive percentage of Linux running in the cloud was theirs.
Oh.
Do you remember what that? My battery on my laptop was dying because I
don't have the notes with me. Yes, they made some ridiculous claim about. Well, I say ridiculous, like some obscene percentage of all the Linux
greater than 50.
Web servers. I want to say it was like that they said 80% or something like that. I don't, man. I wish I had my notes with me from the show.
But they said that they were all running on Azure, like cloud-based versions were running on Azure, and all I could think was, "There's no way." With AWS being their,
I mean, you got Google Compute, you got AWS EC2 instances out there. Like,
you got DigitalOcean.
Really?
You have.
Well, let's take all the small guys. Let's just focus on the two big ones.
Yeah, there's no way. AWS is definitely leading the way.
I actually found that stat. It's over 70% of all Linux boxes running on Azure are running on Azure. So I believe that.
Nice. Well done there. I see what you did. Yeah. There was something else that was on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah. When it was said there, like literally both me and Mike looked at each other like, no way.
The .NET Native. That was another cool feature coming out where you could just simply recompile your app to be a .NET Native app, and it would you would gain.
It was a huge performance boost.
Yeah, the numbers were like 20, 40, 60. So I'm trying to remember like which was which though. You got a smaller file size in a smaller memory footprint, and
CPU.
no, I know what it was. It was something like a dang. No, I don't. One of them was the start time, a cold start time, and then the other one was the warm start time for the app, and then the other one was the memory footprint.
Yeah, I can't. So here's what he's talking about with .NET Native thing is basically what happens is right now when you compile a .NET application, it compiles it into the what is it, CIL or whatever, and
CLR. Or no, yeah, more.
So then that gets run, but the first time you take a big hit because it has to basically load it all up and get it ready to run. When you do it this way, it actually compiles it down to C level code, right? Wasn't that what it was?
No, this was it compiles it down to native machine code that performs like C++ code. But this is taking like your universal apps, C# app, and compiling it down to native.
Here we go.
It performs their app will start from a fresh start 60% faster than it did, and all you had to do was just recompile it, and it would use anywhere from 15 to 20% less memory than it did. And again, you're just recompiling the app.
Yeah, and another thing that they were talking about a lot is they spent a lot of time in their runtime making sure that applications now are easier on the processor because they're more concerned than ever about doing things on the mobile platforms and tablets and that kind of thing. So they've really been focusing on these things a lot. I mean, there was definitely some cool things that came out. There was another website. It was something to Microsoft. Man, I tweeted all this stuff out.
Actually, real quick, I just wanted to mention that there actually was a tool called NGen. I think it even came out like when .NET came out that let you compile things to native code. But I'd always heard it was kind of a bad thing because you lost a lot of the benefits of like just-in-time compiling. So I've never been really clear on what the difference between NGen and the new .NET native stuff is. But I've heard the same claims about performance benefits and everything. So I'm kind of interested to hear the difference. And if you know what the difference is, I would love to hear it.
Yeah. Oh, and the site I was talking about. And it's free, by the way. You can go up there and check out all these things that we were just kind of mentioning, is MicrosoftVirtualAcademy.com. So they definitely have a lot of cool stuff. And it's all free. Like, they teach you things. They have sections broken down by types, so C# and XAML, hybrid cloud automation, cloud app development, blah, 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 blah. There's a ton of stuff. So definitely go check that out if you're interested in the newest things coming and learning for free.
Yep.
All right. So I think we've hit a lot of points on the build ATL. So what you got?
Yeah,
Joe?
there's plenty of stuff out there that you can find.
Yeah.
Yep. So I just want to mention really quick, Tampa Code Camp is coming up. I missed the Orlando Code Camp when I moved to the area, but just kind of throwing it out there. I do plan on starting to hit up some of the meetups in Central Florida. So if you guys are in Central Florida, you should hit
what
me up.
day is that? I'll be there.
Yeah, you're going to be there?
Should I drive now? Do I need to?
I'm looking at, I think it's July 14th. So you've got a couple weeks.
I'm actually going to be down there, dude. I'm not going to be too far from you.
Oh, really? In Tampa?
Yeah. I will be just across the way from Tampa. So I might actually come out to that.
Oh, awesome. July 18th is the day.
Excellent, dude. I'm going to be down there.
All right.
So the next one, I actually appreciated this. So Rebecca on Twitter, the other night, I had a very, very long coding night. I think the longest ever that I've done. And I was getting a little punch drunk and I needed some humor. And she came to the rescue. She said, what do they call an alligator in a vest?
Right.
Yes. Anybody?
I don't know.
An investigator.
That's wonderful.
So it was super corny and exactly what I needed at about 3 or 4 a.m.
Sometimes a good bad joke can just make you feel fuzzy.
Oh,
wait. Why are you calling her joke a bad joke?
That was fantastic.
It's a good bad joke.
You know, the great part is I think all of us looked at this on our phone and it cut off the actual answer. And I was like, well, she's never going to give us the answer? This is ridiculous.
You were like texting back and forth like, what's the answer? I don't know.
And it was just further down on the tweet. She built suspense. So we appreciated that. That was fun.
Yeah. Now I have to pour one out for my buddy here.
Singleton.
So, oh God, no. No, me and Singleton are tight. No.
ReSharper?
Oh my God. So we've already talked about, how I had uninstalled it and everything, and I've been, sans ReSharper. And honestly, I've kind of gotten addicted to productivity tools. The add-in that Microsoft makes for Visual Studio, productivity tools or Pro Tools or something like that.
Yeah.
2013, and it's got some nice little add-ins to Studio, but definitely not to the degree that ReSharper has, especially ReSharper with .cover, which was my favorite combination. And so, I said last time that I would eventually come back to try and ReSharper out, if I ever decided to or felt the need to. So I did. I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to Ultimate. And because every version I've ever used in the past has just been immediate gold, like I've loved it, and it has just been a part of me, why am I going to bother with this trial? I'm all in. Let's buy the upgrade to Ultimate and awesome things will happen. And I didn't like it.
Really?
No.
Like too slow or shortcuts? What didn't you like?
I didn't like it.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Really bad?
Well, my experience was really bad. Let me be clear. You know how you hear a lot of people that say that what they don't like about ReSharper is that it's slow, and what it does to Visual Studio and things like that. They're not wrong. So I had problems where just trying to navigate between especially the current code base I'm working in is rather large in terms of the number of files and whatnot, and going between files, it would just Visual Studio would hang often, almost always, and you'd get a not responding prompt coming up from Visual Studio, all because you decided it was time to look at another file.
Ooh.
And it was random little things like that, and just even sluggishness while using it. And again, I know before anyone jumps on this, because I mentioned the productivity tools, there is a known issue where productivity tools and ReSharper cannot coexist. So I had already, at first I tried just leaving it productivity tools disabled and see if, that would work. And then that still wasn't buying me anything. So I uninstalled productivity tools because, really wanted to commit to ReSharper, especially after I'd already paid for the license without trying the trial. But, and it's still, my luck still wasn't bad. So I ended up.
Wasn't good.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. It did not work out well for me. And so I ended up uninstalling it almost within 24 hours.
Wow.
Of paying for the license.
Oh, that's right.
And so for the first time.
What's your license key? I'll try it out, make sure it's
yeah, no kidding. Share it on Twitter and just let whoever gets it first get it.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to make sure it really is bad.
Right. So I, but for the first time though, ReSharper, like a lot of tools, or not a lot, but several tools do this thing where after you uninstall it, they immediately open up a browser to their feedback page and they want to know hey, why are you uninstalling this thing, right? And I have always just been I ain't got time for that. Forget it. And why do you care? Whatever, right? But this was the first time where I was like, no, I love this thing. I've loved this thing for so long now, right? I have, told everyone I've gone to the hilltop and I've sang its praises for so long now, and now it has betrayed me. I need to let you know how I feel about this betrayal, right? So I actually did write back. So I will say that it's not over, right? Because there is advantage to filling out those forms, it turns out, because their support team immediately got back in touch with me to wanting to find out why. And one of the JetBrains tools is the profiler. And so I sent them some profile information from Visual Studio so that they could debug and see like what was happening with it. So maybe they'll fix the problem in a future ReSharper bug. But until then, I'm kind of like, at the mercy of if they fix the bug, if they decide to fix it, if they can reproduce it, if they can fix it, whatever, right?
And to be clear, you're not running on like a Core i3. You have like an i7 with 16 gigs of RAM, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, SSD and all that good stuff. Yeah. It's not a slouch machine, and I can't use my favorite tool.
That's a little rough.
Which really makes it difficult. Like, I suppose I haven't tried installing .cover by itself because, I
it
suppose
just
I
hurts
could.
too much.
Yeah, the paint's a little too fresh. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, I feel you. That would hurt.
So all you ReSharper naysayers, I guess scoot over.
Here he is. All right, so one last quick thing in the news section before we get into the real stuff here today is this hit me so hard the other night because we've all been there where you got to get something done, right? Like it has to be done. You have to get it done. Dude, I'm sitting there and I think I even IM'd Outlaw and I was like, dude, I'm really just starting to throw away good programming sense right now. He's like, dude, you need to tweet that. And I did. And a lot of people favored it because apparently everybody feels this pain, right? Like you're up it's the 11th hour and you've got, 10 more hours of work to do. And it's like, oh God. And so you just really start, almost just forgiving yourself ahead of time for what you're about to do because it's like, I don't have time to make this perfect. I don't have time to make this even decent. I'm just making this, right?
Well, maybe this should be the next poll then, because I dare say that like a majority of code that any developer has written where they were like under the gun, tight deadline and really, pressured, that's when they probably wrote the code that they are the least proud of. Maybe. Or there's, portions of code they're like, yeah, I'm not proud of that part, but I had to get it done, so...
I'd love to see that commit message. I can just imagine it saying, like, I dare you to say something, 4 a.m.
Actually, I was laughing about this earlier. So I've become a fan of rebase in Git because I thought you could squash your own history. Well, apparently there's a way to do that, but the way that I've done it doesn't. So my commit messages, like there's things like, man, this is some BS.
Just shoot me.
Like I definitely had a bunch of commits where I'm like, man, I'm fixing another problem with their framework. I'm so ticked off right now, right? Like
remove test case since code didn't pass QA.
Wait, I didn't run a test case. So,
I guess they're about to good practices.
Can't fail.
But no, I mean seriously, like we've all been there where it's like, oh, you started out, you had separated all your classes, you had this nice roadmap ahead of you, and you get down into it, and 90 bugs later that you're trying to work around, you're like, man, I don't even care what this looks like when it's done, as long as it comes up on the screen the way it's supposed to, right? So, yeah, it just wanted it. All of those who favored it and retweeted, I'm sure that you've all been there.
I did it for the
lulz. You struck a nerve.
I did it for the lulz, right?
Git commit commented out failing tests. If you guys don't recall, or if this is new to you, and you do find yourself in a similar situation as Alan did, where it's 4 a.m. and you got to do a commit, and you're like, gosh, what do I don't even know what to say about this commit. You really should just go to whatthecommit.com and let it tell you what your commit message should be.
Yeah, I wish I would have remembered that the other night, because I would have, or the other morning. So yeah, man, that was a rough night. So anyways, on to what we're talking about today, which are hierarchical data sets. We did
What's that?
Yeah, we did a couple of episodes on SQL a while back, and these kind of things come up all the time, and they're a little bit more advanced topics. We're going to start down at the bottom with this, but we're going to work our way up. So the first one that we're going to talk about is called the adjacency list. And it's pretty simple. If you've worked in databases for long at all, you've seen this stuff. essentially, if you think of an employee table, just a simple table, typically what you'll have is an employee ID and a manager ID. That is the adjacency list right there. Essentially, it's a self-referencing parent-child relationship within the same table.
Well, let me sum it up in an easier way.
All right.
Every record knows its immediate parent.
Yes. Yeah. So if you have an employee ID, let's say that Michael's the boss.
Yeah,
I'm the middle
guy.
Michael's the boss. Joe's the middle guy, and I'm the grunt down at the bottom. So
That's why you were up at 4 a.m.
Right. So Michael's ID 1, Joe's ID 2. So Michael, his manager ID is going to be null because he's the top of the chain, right?
That's right.
Joe,
I like where this is going.
Joe's ID 2. Well, his manager ID is going to be 1. That's Michael. And then me down at the bottom, my employee ID is 3, and my manager is 2, so that's Joe. So if you were to query this thing going up, then you'd see that, hey, I am Joe's worker and Joe is Mike's worker. And that's how the table looks.
Okay, so it's a tree basically, right? So everyone has only one parent, but each parent could theoretically be parent to multiple.
Yeah, so if we wanted to break that down to where it wasn't a complete waterfall down, right, to where it was Mike, then you, then me, it could be Mike's at the top, ID 1, manager ID null, then your ID 2, manager ID 1, I'm employee ID 3 with manager ID 1. So both of us are just one level below him, but multiple children, just like you said.
Okay, so an example thing I might want to query is give me all Michael's reports.
Yep.
Right?
And
Well, are we going to talk about direct reports, or are we going to talk about like the full tree?
let's start with direct reports, right?
Let's keep it easy.
Yeah, we'll get into the meat of the problem in a second. But yeah, so direct reports, you basically be like, hey, select star from or star. That's a bad idea, anyways. But select star splat from employees where manager ID equal 1. Give me all of Mike's direct reports, right? So that's it. Pretty simple. Another thing that you typically see in these type of situations are, hey, show me the top level guy. And there's usually 2 ways of going about this. You'll either have the manager ID null, or you'll have the manager ID equal whatever his ID is. So you'd say, hey, select star from employee where manager ID equal null. That'd give you Mike back. Or if they had filled it in, you could say where employee ID equal manager ID. And now you have the top level guy. So those have covered the basics of what the adjacency list is. Now to get into the harder part, right? So let's say that you are a few levels deep. How do you go about doing that?
Well, this is where you'd be tempted to use your recursive CTE to solve your problem. Okay,
you would do this.
You could do it this way.
Yeah. So,
but go ahead.
CTE, for those who don't know or haven't listened to the previous ones, that's a common table expression.
Oh, and just to be clear, the previous episodes that we're talking about were episodes 13 and 14.
Yep, and those are pretty deep episodes. So, if you want to put your SQL hat on, there's a lot.
Propeller hats are a must.
Yeah, those are some pretty deep episodes. But a CTE is a common table expression, and all that is it gives you. It kind of allows you to create virtual tables in your queries. With some added benefits, what we're talking about with the recursive CTE. Now, here's the thing with it. It's only available in some RDBMSs. MySQL does not have CTEs. Postgres does, SQL Server does, Oracle does. A lot of what they call enterprise-based database management systems do have this. But like MySQL, one of the most popular on the planet, does not have a recursive or even CTEs. So,
and sometimes people call these with clauses, right? Or I think I've seen that word before. We'll say you're doing a with in your SQL.
Yep, that's what it starts with, is a with. So with a recursive CTE, they're and I know why Mike's saying that you would be tempted to do it. And here's the thing: if you have relatively shallow or smaller data sets that you're using, just go ahead and use them. They're awesome.
What's smaller, like 100, 1,000?
I mean, it kind of depends, right? It depends on the load of your system and all that. I mean, I've definitely done it with thousands of records, and it performs fine.
It's going to be manageable.
It will be manageable. I mean,
so just to be clear, then the way this CTE is going to work is like, let's say you have like with employee hierarchy as and then you'll do a select star from what was your table? Employees, right? Where employee ID equals 1.
Yep.
Right.
Your first guy, or let's say where manager ID is null. Let's get the top level guy. Right?
Okay, where it's null. Okay, where employee ID equals null, union all, select star from employee. What did I name the CTE originally?
CTE
employee hierarchy.
Yep.
Okay, so select star from employee where employee manager equal employee hierarchy dot employee ID.
Yep.
Right. So that second portion of that second select statement in that union all is going to call back on the CTE itself. Right. So it's going to recursively call on it, and that's going to be fine in your smaller data set example.
Yep. Or it could even be a large data set within that table. But depending on what you're doing with that across other tables that you're joining to and that kind of thing, it can get really big, really fast, and now your performance can really degrade.
When you say performance, you mean CPU? We talking memory, everything?
All of it, right? Like, so it could be your CPU. Well, so here's the thing. You can index these columns. The one great thing about the adjacency list is it's super easy to index, right? You got 2 columns. You have your employee ID and your manager ID. So SQL Server can utilize these indexes, which is pretty nice.
There's other ways to solve hierarchical data too, where you could also index it nice. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the benefit of adjacency list.
Well, so the fact that it's simple, though, is what I'm saying is, right? Like, you have your parent-child relationship in one table.
Well, when we get to nested set models, though, those are pretty simple things that you're going to index
Not building them.
No, but we're talking about the indexing, though.
Okay,
we're talking about
for the performance part.
Because what I'm thinking, like, when you talk about the employee ID and the manager ID and the benefits of the adjacency list, immediately I'm thinking of the fact that you could have integrity on those columns now.
Yep, very easy. Yep.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Cyclic data.
Oh, if you have something that references something up above?
Yep.
So here's the thing. With something like SQL Server, I think it has a max recursion.
Depth.
Yeah, a max recursion of like 99. It might be higher than that. I can't remember.
So it won't totally kill the box, but really it's invalid for this. You're not going to be able to model this with this approach.
No, actually, what you would run into anyways is that would eventually end up breaking you because, yeah, if you have something, if you have a record 5 down that references a record that was 3 up from it, then yeah, you're going to start getting into this recursion. So essentially, you're just going to start getting back a ton of data that doesn't make sense, right? So,
Yep.
Yeah, that's a problem. But that's actually a data problem, right? That's an integrity issue. And
well, it depends on your data. You know, for like a manager hierarchy, that would be a bad thing. But
Well, is it?
might be. Well, I mean, there are some management chains that are called flat, right? To where people can report to multiple different people. So
yeah, or like checks and balances, like the legislative branch checks the judicial.
No,
the judicial,
I'm thinking of like the more popular, the most, a big known one was BlackBerry. When there was a period of time where BlackBerry had two CEOs.
Yeah.
Right, so the whole company, like it's starting at the top, there were 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean,
if you've got 2 parents, this is right out the window too.
Yep. So,
But I think those are going to be problematic, though. Like when you get into like circular data structures like that, though, we're talking about hierarchical. I don't know if you heard, Joe, but at the beginning of the show, we said we were going to talk about hierarchies.
Not
now you're
circular.
talking about circles.
Right.
I think that's a different show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the graph database show.
It's so difficult being remote. You can't see that we're talking about hierarchies.
Yeah, you guys can't hit me anymore.
Start throwing things across the table. So, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. When you do get into the CTE, so when we were talking about the performance and all that, if you think about what SQL Server is actually having to do behind the scenes, I'm sure they've built in optimizations. But in the old days, before you had things like CTEs, essentially what people would do is they'd write procs, right? That would then fill in temporary tables, and it would loop over and say, okay, go give me all the children of this. So, hey, select star from employees where manager ID equal this. Then you get down another level, and then you'd step through every one of those and say, all right, give me all the employees that report to them. And so you kind of fill this in. Behind the scenes, that's really what SQL Server is probably doing, is it's saying, Okay, give me all those parents now, or all those children. Now give me all those children. And so it's one at a time, stepping down the hierarchy. So if you have a really deep tree and if you have a wide table, and by a wide table you have a ton of columns in it, these queries get expensive, especially if the data set's split across pages. Like, there's all kinds of things that can happen there. But the deeper you go, the more recursive levels there are, the more expensive it is to actually run that.
But on the plus side, though, for adjacency lists, they're easy to implement.
Oh, super easy. I mean,
right?
Especially if you have an RDBMS that supports CTEs, right? If you have a database system that does not, like MySQL, then you end up building something like what we just mentioned, where you're filling in some sort of temporary table, some staging table, to where you can pull the data out with an adjacency list.
Well, not only is the implementation of it simple, which is easy for me to say, the CRUD on it is also easier too.
Super
so like,
easy.
Moving data around, deleting data, inserting data into it. Those are all cheap, relatively cheap operations compared to other hierarchical data implementations.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, moving somebody from manager 1 to manager 2, you basically say, hey, update employee set manager ID equal to 2, where employee ID equal 5, right? Whatever. So super, super easy. And you're done. If you do that, you're done. There's nothing else to look at, nothing else to touch.
I mean, chances are, if you're writing any code where you even touch the database, you even look at the database, you've probably already seen data that matches this model.
Yep.
Like you already know about it.
Yep. I mean, old not dashboards, like what can I think? Forums. This is how the commenting system would work in a lot of forums, right? You'd have common ID equal 1. If somebody replied to that, then common ID 2's parent ID was 1, and so on down the list. And that's how a lot of commenting system works. Heck, I think even if you look in the WordPress database, you'll actually see those type of relationships, right? This particular piece of content belongs to that piece of content, belongs to that piece of content. So it's a very simple way to structure a schema for representing a hierarchy. So what are the problems with it?
So we mentioned that large trees are going to cause problems for this. If you're dealing with large data sets, then this might not be your guy, right? That's like the number one thing that comes to mind for me as far as like problems for this.
Yeah, and here's another thing I will say: even if you're not going down a ton of levels, even if it's something that you are constantly querying that way, it can get expensive, right?
Oh, that's a great point too.
Yeah, so you kind of need to look at the frequency of it, because taking the hit on it once or twice may not be a big deal, but if every single query you have, and I'll give a good example. If you have, let's say you have
what if it was a product catalog?
Right, that's a perfect example. If you're constantly having to query down the categories every single time you're going after products, that gets really expensive, because you're now crawling that tree on every single query, and if you got a lot of people hitting that, I mean that can really start running into some performance issues.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand this, I wanted to kind of sum it up. So would you say that an adjacency list is one strategy for solving the hierarchical data problem, where each record keeps track of its parent?
Yep.
Works for me.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. So I think we've got adjacency list down. It's a fairly simple one. You've seen it before, but we wanted to go ahead and lay the groundwork before we moved on to any other, because we wanted to, this is going to be the first of a few episodes where we wanted to talk about different hierarchical data models, right? And so we need to lay some groundwork out, or some framework out that we can all talk on a common language here. So I think we got adjacency list. But before we move on to the next model, I do want to say that if you haven't already, we would greatly appreciate if you would leave us a review. You can go to codingblocks.net/review and find your platform of choice, be it iTunes or Stitcher, or whatever. If you know of another platform that you like to find us on and you want to leave a review there, hey, by all means, please do, and let us know about that platform, because there's probably there's a ton of aggregators out there that we're not aware of. So,
yep.
Sorry, I'm being distracting on camera.
He is being distracted.
There we go. I figured if I took a selfie of myself sitting here, then I could just kind of tape my phone to my webcam and go to the bathroom. Is it working?
All right,
go ahead and go to the bathroom.
So maybe the poll for this one should be like, how do you think this remote gig is working? Should Joe move back to Atlanta?
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and vote yes.
And if our sound quality sucks this time, you guys should let us know. We'd appreciate it.
Blame Joe.
Yep. All right, so the next one. What's the next one we're going to look at?
So as we step into our deep dive here for nested or for hierarchical data models, the next one that we want to talk about is nested set models. Right? You want to give us a brief overview, or you want me to dig into it?
So I will try and give a brief overview. I think we brought this up previously as well.
I did want to say we did talk about this in episode 13 at around the 44, 45 minute mark, but there was still some. I don't know that we went into it as deep as we probably could have.
Right, yeah. I mean, it definitely wasn't centered around hierarchical data sets. I think it was kind of a mention in passing. So essentially what it is this. If you tried to take a hierarchy and flatten it out to where if you thought about everybody that was underneath something, let's talk about employees and managers again, because it's something people can kind of relate to. If you were to just take your arms and wrap them, if they were big enough to wrap around all the people under you, that's kind of what the nested set is. So essentially, if you envision that everybody has a left and a right, all right, and their right is always one more than their left if they are the only person at that level. So let's say you're at the so you kind of need to picture it from the bottom of the tree first, right? If you're at the very bottom of the tree, let's say that your ID is 20.
Hold on, before you go down that path, though.
Yeah.
Because I already see like there's some confusion, and I think I got a better way to visualize this.
Okay.
Right? Like let's get out of the employee mindset for a moment, and let's just talk family tree.
Okay.
Right? So if you're building your own family tree, and let's say that you're making the smallest family tree you could possibly make and being lazy, and you just start with you and your parents. Okay. So this left-right business that Alan's talking about, basically what you're going to do is you're going to start at the top of the tree, right? And you're going to go down every node and count it. And then when you get to the bottom of a branch, you're going to start walking back up and continue counting, right? And then when you get to where a branch forks, then you're going to go down that branch and continue counting, and you're going to come back up, and you're going to keep doing that until all branches have been visited, and every node in the tree has been visited at least twice.
Yep. Okay?
And this is where the left-right value part that Alan comes in. So as you walk down these nodes the first time, you're adding or you're setting a value for the left side, and then as you start walking back up a branch is when you set the right value. Okay. Yep. So in this very shallow family tree version, then if I start with myself, my left is 1. And then let's say I start with my mom, her left is 2. And because I don't go any further, right? Her right is now 3, and I come back to me. And then I go to my dad, and his left is 4. And because I'm not going any further down the tree, his right is 5, and then I come back to me. And now my right is 6. So I have a left value of 1 and a right value of 6. My mom has a left value of 2 and a right value of 3. And my dad has a left of 4 and a right of 5.
Yep.
Okay. Now, that is as simple as I can explain that, but it's hard to appreciate the value of it just yet.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to make this tree bigger, right? And let's say that we decided to include my mom's parents in this tree. Then let's start over with the counting.
Yep.
I start with myself. My left is 1. I go to my mom. Her left is 2. I go to her mom, which is be my grandmother. Her left is 3. She's now the end. So her right is 4. Go back up to my mom, and we go back to the next branch, which would be her father. So his left is 5, right 6, and then come back to my mom. Her right is now 7. Now we come back up to me, and then we go to my dad to calculate his left of 8, his right of 9, and now my right is 10.
Yep.
So now you can see that when there was just 3 people in that hierarchy, my left was 1 and 6, but as soon as we added 2 more, my values went left of 1 and right of 10.
Yeah, and what we're going to do to help illustrate this is we're going to put an image up on the show notes for /episode 28 so that you could actually kind of see what we're talking about here. But
We'll link to some. There's already some that are made. I'm using a family tree as an example, just because everybody can relate to that. That's an easy one to understand. But there's some. Particularly in the Wikipedia article, if you look at this, where they talk about product catalogs as an example for how you might use this. But the point that I wanted to illustrate, though, is just that before you went too deep into left right, that really all that is I consider it, and I haven't actually read this anywhere, and I'm curious to hear your take on it, but I consider this to be the expense of walking the tree.
Yep.
That's what those 2 values represent. The left
you have
is
to rewalk that tree every time you insert or update.
Yeah.
Yes.
The left. Well, okay, hold on. The left value represents the expense of walking the branch, the first path down that branch,
right.
And the right value represents the expense of walking all of the sub branches until you got back to that node. Now, as you already kind of hinted at, though, and as you might have noticed when I introduced just 2 more people into that hierarchy, I couldn't just... I had to start over with my counting. I couldn't just easily insert that in. So those would be extremely expensive operations, especially in large data sets.
Yeah, so notice what he said. His first, when he was first just including his 2 parents, his left was 1, his right was 6, right? When he introduced his grandparents, his right bound completely changed at that point. But that's not just the important part. So did all the left values for everybody under or after his mom. After the first node was visited after him, every other node at that point changed for its left and right values. So he essentially had to recalculate the entire tree at that point.
Right. Which means that if I had to, if I wanted to remove my grandmother from that list, she was the 3rd node I went to.
Yep.
But if I wanted to remove her, then she would change the values for my grandfather, my mother, my father, and myself. Like the entire tree, everybody had at least one value, whether it be the left or the right or both, changed.
Yep.
So that's why, typically in implementations where nested set models are used, you wouldn't want to bother trying to even maintain doing those type of CRUD operations. Instead, you want this data to be throwaway. You create it, you save it into a table, and when you're done with it, you throw it away and you rebuild it.
Yep. It's one of those things to where it's probably not, if it's for mission critical, time critical applications where data is transactional and changing, you're not using this particular model because it would be too hard to maintain. However, if it's something that's not to the minute critical, then if it's something that you can build every hour, every 2 hours, something like that.
Something that you could do in batch.
Something that you can do in batch that you can basically let it run, do its thing, and be done with it. This is when you use the nested set model. But let's go into, some people will be like, well, why would you even do that?
Right, because we've only described bad things about it, right? Even me describing it to you like hurt my brain a little bit just saying it, and I already knew what it was.
Right.
If you've never ran across this before, then I can only assume that you would ask, like, well, it sounds horrible. I never want to do that.
And here's the thing too. A lot of times, the interesting part of this is it typically relates back to the God, what do we call it? The adjacency list. So just to give you an idea, this is usually something that you build off of an existing schema like an adjacency list. This is not something you start with. The nested list is almost, I'm not saying it never is. I'm sure somebody out there has spent a lot of time writing CRUD operations to make this work, which seems somewhat insane to me. But typically, the way that this is used is you take an adjacency list where they already have a hierarchical model built, and then you build this nested set, and we'll go into the reasons for it. Well, we might as well right now anyways, right? Like, what's one?
It makes sense to me. Like, if you want to know the ancestors of Michael, you just take that left to right values and say, give me everything in between, and you're done, right?
Yep.
Well, more specifically, let's talk about like where, if you wanted to find only the ancestors or, the lineage of my mother in that example, right? Her left value was 2 and her right value was 6, right? So you
7.
No, it was 6. Yeah, because grandmother was 3 left, 4 right, 5. Oh, yeah, it was 7.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Yeah, real time editing. So yeah, I'm sorry. So my mom would have been 2 and 7, and then you could do a search where the left value is greater than 2 and the right value is less than 7, and then that would immediately return back anyone in the tree below mother. Right.
Yep.
Now, here's the big advantage of this, right? Like, they are, depending on how much data you're working with, it is a little bit more involved to create this data. Now, that doesn't, like, you can have hundreds of thousands of records and still create this data within 30 seconds, right? So that might not sound horrible. It is horrible if you were trying to do that inside of a web call, right? So you wouldn't want to do it then. That's why you'd want to do it in batch. But so you could build that all up front. But you take this relative term of it takes a while to create. But once you have this data created, the querying of it is ridiculously fast to get
easy
in really large data sets back of these trees. Right, of these in subtrees or start at the entire tree, like whatever portion of the tree you need, right? You could real quickly get to all that data, and because we're just talking about simple integers, right, or depending on how large you need, you can easily index these, which is why I wanted to comment on the adjacency list. Like, that's not necessarily just specific to that. So you can do some nice indexing too and really get your query performance on it. So what you would typically do when you implement these nested set models is you'd have the data, and like Alan said, you would have, going back to our employee example, you'd have that employee table, and built into that, and each one of those records is the adjacency list where every employee knows its manager. Right, so there's a column called manager ID. Right, you would have typically this nested set model that output in its own table, right, and there would be a foreign key relation between the employee table and the hierarchy table, so that you could join those back and forth, and so that you could say, like, hey, where the employee join on where the employee ID equals the hierarchy's employee ID, and then find where the values for left match whatever you're looking for, and the values for right. So if you wanted to find, if you wanted to find everyone in the tree above someone, like, going back to the example where I'd said that my mom's value was 2 and her right value was 7. Or let's use the grandmother in that example. Her left was 3 and her right was 4.
Well, hold up. Before we go that far, I think there's one more piece that we need to add in here. Okay. So we got the left and the right. Okay, that tells us what we encapsulate, right? Like what our reach is, we'll say. There's also one other piece of information, typically when you're doing the nested set model, that you add as well, and that's the level. So as you're walking down, and we'll go into why you do this in a minute, but I wanted to add this in here because this is where the querying becomes easier. So right now, Mike was at the top, so we'd say his node level was 1 or 0, depending on what your ordinals were. His mom is level 2. His grandmother and grandfather are level 3. His dad, when it started coming back up the tree now, is also level 2. All right. So we have nodes 1, 2, and 3. Node levels 1, 2, and 3. And this is important in a second when we start getting into kind of where he was going with this. So now each record has a left, a right, and a level, we'll call it. All right. And so now let's go back to where you were talking about. So you're going to query from your mom or your grandma.
Well, let's start. I was thinking of the grandmother because then you're going down like 3 deep, right?
Okay.
So her left was 3, her right was 4.
Right.
Right. So before we were saying where the values were greater than, but instead we could say like where the left is less than 3 and the right is greater than 4.
Yep.
And that's going to walk you back up the tree. Right. And so that's going to that would return back my mother in that case and myself in that case.
And this is where the level comes into play.
But the level wasn't necessary.
It is. So here's why. So if you were going to do something like say, hey, tell me everybody that is a direct report or a direct parent of Mike, the easiest way to do that is...
Okay. Yes. I see where you're talking about.
And even going back up, because you could say, hey, who were her parents? Now you would just say, hey, we're node level equal node level minus 1, and left is less than that left, and right is greater than this right. And then that way, you're just going up 1. Because if you just said less than, it's just what you said a second ago. If you had said, give me everything where the left is less and the right is greater, that's going to give you everybody above her.
Well, okay. I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with it. But the only reason why I wasn't bringing that in immediately, though, is because it's not required, right? Like you could have the nested set model without that level. Yeah, you could. You could have the nested set model without it.
I don't think
it's
so.
just if depending on you're listing specific kinds of queries where you wanted to go at particular levels, and if that was the case, then yes, it would absolutely be
crucial. I don't know that you could do some of these queries without it, and the reason I say is because when you start doing the left less than and the right greater than, there's no way to narrow it down to just one level above you. Without doing some crazy joins.
But again, if that's the type of thing that you needed to do, if you didn't need to do that type of query, then that level is irrelevant. And that's why I'm saying, like, if you only needed to build a model where you either need to go down the tree from where you start or from up the tree from where you start, then who cares about the level?
But if you say that you only want direct reports or direct parents.
Well, see, and I'm saying I didn't list those examples.
But that's why I'm saying, like, typically when you are doing a nested set model, you want those 3 key pieces of information. And the reason I say is because without the level, you are now hindered to what you can do. You can only go all the way up or all the way down. You can't say, I only want his first 2 levels, or I only want his first level, or I only want the first.
You can do some math on that.
And that's what I'm saying.
On the left,
so now
on the left value.
Now it becomes extremely expensive, and your joins are going to be crazy too.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I'm not discounting this, but what I'm trying to get at though is the core for the nested set model is the left and right.
Yes.
Adding the depth to it, or the level, or whatever you want to call that, is a variation on this that definitely makes it far more beneficial depending on what you're trying to do. But the root core of what's required for the nested set model doesn't require that.
Right, it doesn't.
Okay. That's the only point that I was trying to make, and that's why I hadn't brought it up yet. But now to where you're talking about though, now you could do some more advanced queries like what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that we've. So yeah, we somewhat talked about the pseudo query on it, right? Like if you wanted to do it, you'd say, hey, select star from, and let's say that you call this employee tree, right? Or something like that. Because you still have your employee table, which like we talked about earlier, or not employee, let's stick with the employee because it was already there. You have your employee table that had the manager ID and the employee ID, right? If you're going to create a nested set table, you're probably going to call it employee hierarchy or something like that, right? And then in that table, what you would do is you'd say, hey, select all from employee hierarchy where, employee ID equal 1. And then you would join back to itself and say, join employee hierarchy where left is greater than employee, the parent employee, we'll call it, it's left, and or you just do the between, right? We talked about this before. You can just say a between where left is between the top employees left and right.
Yeah, you lost me a little bit there.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was trying to like.
So if you're trying to find everybody that's a child of that top level, right? You can say, give me everybody where their left is in between my left and my right.
Right, and that'll return back the tree below you.
That'll return back the tree below you. So it's a very simple query. That's another part of the nested set that is actually pretty awesome is when you first put it all together, it's kind of hard to look at. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But once you actually fully understand what you're looking at, which is a flattened hierarchy is really all it is, when you do that, querying this thing becomes easy. Hey, give me all the left values below me that's going to fall in between my left and my right. If you want everybody above, you can say, hey, give me everybody above where their left is less than mine and their right is greater than mine.
Right, to get the in tree above.
Yep, and it's a self join back to itself to the same table. So you would join employee hierarchy to employee hierarchy on these type of predicates that we're saying, where left is between, this employee's left and this employee's right. So it's pretty simple to query, which is one of the big things. Now, building this table, I think you did one recently.
Yeah,
it's a bit of an exercise, right?
It's definitely a fun little challenge if you haven't done one in a while. But and again, like let's exclude where Joe was trying to get crazy with us on the circular crap,
which breaks it completely. You can't even do it, right?
I mean, circular is going to be problematic for a lot of hierarchical,
just about anything.
Yeah, which is why they're called hierarchical.
But how do you prevent that? Right? Like, if my query for kind of recalculating this stuff on an insert or update breaks, there's no sort of constraint that I can really put in the database, right, to prevent this from happening.
No, you could. You could in SQL Server, you could create constraints that would not allow that. You would basically create, I believe, you can create a check constraint in SQL Server, and you could write
how many levels deep
you could write a CTE that would be that check constraint. So it's going to be fairly expensive.
I'm not doing that.
But it could be fairly expensive, right? But what I'm saying is you can actually create a check constraint, I believe, that would allow you to query the hierarchy and make sure that you're not inserting anybody way down here that's referencing, somebody that's going to put them into some sort of circular loop.
That's kind of hard for this model because, it's almost like I'd need to kind of disable that restriction while I'm doing all these individual little updates in a transaction, and then I need to kind of put that constraint back on, right? Because as I'm kind of going through and rejiggering in this, unless I wipe out all the columns,
that's what you usually do.
Again, this would be away. You wouldn't even this data you would not want to be attached to your main table. You want this in its own table because every time this batch runs, you will be blowing that data away and restarting. And so, if you had that as columns, in your main table, then it's going to decrease the performance of it because you're going to end up locking that
all the time.
Yeah, every time this batch runs. But if you put it into a separate table, then you could do all of your work in memory, and then at the very end, just truncate the table and dump it in.
And let's be clear, you would never ever want to try and recalculate these things on the fly. I've heard of people who have tried to put enough space in between left and right, like pad the left and right, so that
like 100 in between each one, and then you can kind of fill in the spots.
Exactly. Right? So, like what Outlaw was saying a minute ago, where he was 1, his mom was 2, his grandma was 3, and then so on back up. Instead of that, he would be 100, she'd be 200, and then 300. And
then you still take a hit because you have to have something on your constraint to be able to verify, like, hey, have I gone beyond yet? Because if I have, now it's time to take the big hit and redo this.
And that's the thing. And to take it even further, now the logic you have to build in to actually determine when you need to rebuild this thing, if it's not just going to be some sort of timed thing, it's going to be insane. So basically what I'm saying is you'd have to write incredibly complicated code to manage an update on something like this, whereas typically what you do is in SQL Server, like a way that you would probably go about this, is you do a select into a new table, so that you didn't lose any gap of time in between when this thing's being built. And if you wanted to swap it out, like a strategy that I've seen done is you select into a new table, and then you would do something like an SP rename to where it's almost instantaneous. You rename the old table to _old, and you rename your new table to what the old table's name was. Yeah. And then that basically swaps it in immediately. And let's take it back to it. The two primary reasons for building this table are 1, performance, and 2, easy to query, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, there is one other, another downside to this that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's that you don't have the referential integrity that your adjacency list had, right? Yep. Like these left-right values are just calculated values. They're meaningless outside of that table.
Yeah.
Even that depth column that you talked about, like if you did go with left, right, and the depth, none of those mean anything other than what within this table. That's the only place where they provide value.
Yep.
So,
and let's be clear though, they are extremely useful. Like if you need performance, they are incredible.
The nest set model, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And also too, I don't think that we mentioned this, but the guy who named it that,
Joe Selko.
Yeah, Joe Selko. He's the one with giving credit for having introduced the name nested set model, and we'll have some links in the show notes to it. It's once you see this some of this imagery to back this up, it'll lock in, it'll sink in a little bit better, because I can understand how, like, if you're hearing this for the first time, this is going to be a tad much to understand. So that's why I'm trying to explain it as well as I can, and I hope I've done a good job of that.
We'll have some good pictures in the show notes.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll have to. But I mean, like everything we do on the podcast, all this stuff is kind of hard to completely visualize. But hopefully, this will give you something to go look at and be like, oh, if I run across this problem in the future, I have an idea of how I can solve it. Right? I've used nested set tables in the past, and I definitely did them to where they were processed like every few hours or whatever, and in situations to where you needed to see things like employees or even products or things like that, because the performance gain that you get out of it is absolutely fantastic. Now, if you have bad data, it can cause you problems, right? Like if your referential integrity on your real table that contains that data doesn't do things like check for circular dependencies, or there's gaps in the data, now you have to figure out what you're going to do with it, right? Like typically you're going to look down from the CEO, and then you're going to have that manager and then their manager or whatever. But what happens when you have a break somewhere in the middle where this guy's just kind of floating and he doesn't report to anybody? What do you do with that data, right?
Oh, well, this is a good thing that we haven't mentioned, though, is because that by having this data in its own table, right? There's nothing to say that you can't have multiple hierarchies in that table.
Right.
So if as you're creating these nested set models, right, or as you're creating the data for this nested set model, depending on your data structure, you might have multiple people who are considered, the top of their respective tree, and you could have multiples of those trees.
Yep. Now,
that's why tying it back to the original table with a foreign key is going to be crucial in that regard. So, like in the employee example that I gave, where you would have an employee ID in this hierarchical, I think you referred to it as the employee tree table. Yep. So you'd have an employee ID column that was a foreign key back to the employee table.
Yes. Now, one thing this does not do, though, and will not allow you to do, is you could not have a child be a child of multiple parents. All right?
No.
So there are other situations and other solutions that we're going to talk about, other models.
Well, that does kind of confuse the family tree example that we started with, though. But that's flipping the tree on end. Then.
Yeah, so the way that he actually created the tree where he was at the top kind of surprised me because it sounded like he created his parents. But no, if you were to take it from his grandparents down, you'd see that. So, like, I could not report to both Michael and Joe in this type of situation unless you had the tree upside down. But then you'd have the inverse problem too. But that is one thing that this particular model will not support is a child can only be a child of one parent. It cannot have multiple parents. There are other models that will allow that, but that's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, and we're gonna discuss. Like I said, we're gonna discuss some other models, in coming episodes. So we look forward to this as being, a fun topic to be able to dig into. So, and by the way, family trees you start it yourself and work down.
I never seen a family tree like that. I thought the tree was always like the branches came out. Those were all the kids and everything, right?
Yeah, they go down. Like when you draw a family tree. Okay, maybe I'm just crazy.
I don't know that I've ever drawn a family tree, so I'm probably the worst person to ask about that. All
right, so yeah, there's some other examples we're going to get into. Materialized path, closure tables. We're going to come into these into coming episodes, so we're really looking forward to this.
Yeah, and I think this is all really useful information. I mean, if you ever cross these paths, you'll know some of the pains that you hit doing this kind of stuff. It looks like we lost Joe.
Yeah, so I don't know what happened there.
We've had our first technical difficulty on the show, which is not too bad. An hour and some odd minutes in. So
yeah, somebody reboot the internet. It's down. Yeah. All right, so technical difficulties have been resolved, and we're back.
Yep. So I just wanted to recap. The adjacency model is basically where a record stores its parent ID. And it's a simple model, but the problem is that it scales poorly. So as the data size grows, it gets slower and slower. And to contrast it with what we've just been talking about, the other solution we talked about tonight is the nested set model, which is much easier to query, much faster, much more elegant, but the problem is that you have to maintain that data. So it's harder on inserts and updates, but it's much quicker for actually querying that data.
I agree with most of that, except with maintaining the data, you would just drop it.
Yeah.
And you just can't do it that often, right?
Well, you could. I mean, it depends
on your batch.
Yeah, it could. I mean, so like Outlaw said, I mean, we've had situations. I know he's done it recently, and I've done situations where I had hundreds of thousands, if not close to 1 million records, and you can do it in under a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I had it down to like within the teens, I think, in seconds.
Yeah.
For hundreds of thousands of records. So
page load's got to be less than a second.
Right. So you wouldn't do it on the page load. That's why you'd batch it. But you might do it every 10 minutes. You might do it every 5. You might do it every. So it's not anything that you're actually going to be dependent on a user interaction. This is going to happen in batch behind the scenes, and then you're just going to use that table.
Yeah. For my purpose, I was able to do it like once a day.
Yeah.
Right.
And that 16 seconds or whatever, you wouldn't want to take that in a web request, but 16 seconds, at 4 a.m. in the morning, who cares?
Yeah.
Right. So,
or even throughout the day, right? If nobody's actually using that code, it's just happening, and then you get to benefit by using the table.
Yeah, and we'll have, like I said, we'll have some links to this stuff in the show notes and some imagery to help describe it. So be sure to check out the show notes and Yeah, so let's get into the resources that we like.
Yep. So one that I had found a while back, and kind of what sparked a little bit of this was on SlideShare, there was a nice little thing that a guy put together that was literally several different types of models for hierarchical data. And we'll go ahead and link to that one. And then one that I had found years and years ago was Joe Selko's SQL for Smarties. That's a book that's available on Amazon, and it's really good. I mean, if you want to get some mind benders, this is, I think, where the first nested set model thing came into play. So, or at least one of the first references that I'm aware of. So that's another reference. Yeah,
and there's also a link that we'll include to Stack Overflow where it talks about different options for hierarchical data too. That gives a really nice, concise overview of different models. So we'll include that as well.
All right, so now it is time for the tip of the week.
Oh, yeah. Let's get into it.
Week, tip of the month.
Whatever. Why you got to do that? Why you got to be like that?
It hurts.
Okay. So here's the thing. Like, how well, be honest with yourself now, how well do you recall all of your Big O notation?
Totally.
Like not just all the variants, but also like the expense of it. Which one's better than another? Like
you have memorized
which
this?
Is worse? Which is best? Like, average. Do you remember all of that? Right? Space
I remember
complexity, time complexity.
There's a thing called Big O.
There's a lot of it, and it is a bit much to try to remember all of it. So, and especially if you don't use it regularly, I mean, I don't know how much, you talk about Big O notation with your spouse, but, it comes up every now and then.
Right.
But if it doesn't, then this is where you have the BigOCheatSheet.com.
It's awesome.
And it's this really cool resource that you can go to, and it maps it all out. You can see which ones are the average performers, which ones are the worst performers, which ones are the best performers for different. It gets into it like for data structure operations, array sorting operations, graph operations, like heap. I mean, there's a bulk of different ways that it talks about, which operations perform better and gives their Big O notation for each of those operations. So again, BigOCheatSheet.com, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes.
Yep, that's most excellent.
Yeah, and the one I wanted to mention is actually from, let's see, they've got a pronunciation guide. Devious.azurewebsites.net has a great setup for basically the shortcuts they use with their gaming mouse. So we talked about this a little bit in episode 8. Basically gaming mice have all sorts of crazy buttons, and they've got a great diagram here. It's got maybe, 8 buttons on the side of their mouse, and they show actually the kinds of things that they have hooked up to these different buttons. So you can press a single button to build, a single button to step over, step into, stuff like that. So this is really nice. And what I really thought was kind of funny about it is if I tried to be honest with myself and kind of set up shortcuts for myself for things that I actually do commonly. I might have one for like restarting Visual Studio. I might have one for, I can go ahead and add and commit with a message of, I don't know why this works,
Uninstalling ReSharper.
Exactly.
Oh, God, that hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts to even make the joke.
Troubleshooting my wireless connection.
I do have to question, though, how did you say they pronounce this? Because if I look at their URL, I got to hear this again.
Yeah, it's the first syllable is the problem one. It's like on their pronunciation guide, it's DIH, which looks to me like di, but I always thought the word was devious.
Yeah, because when I look at their URL, it's definitely devious.
Yeah, it's devious.
But how do you pronounce DIH?
Devious. Yeah, I don't know. This is wrong.
Yeah, their URL is devious.azurewebsites.
I think I just got it. It's devious.
No, but...
Yeah, there's actually underneath the pronunciation, there's a definition for the word, which is showing a skillful use of programming tactics to achieve goals, as in, he's as devious as a programmer needs to be.
Okay,
it's devious. All right.
Yeah.
I hate that I just said it totally wrong, even though there's a pronunciation guide at the very top. Oh, well.
Yeah, life goes
Anyway,
on.
it's an awesome article, and it's got great pictures, and it's a great idea.
Excellent. So mine is because I ran into some issues, or a couple of us ran into issues recently, where we couldn't see dimensions in a cube.
Oh my God!
You go into SQL management.
Hold on. You can't bring up this. We haven't even talked about MDX or cubes, not even once, and suddenly you're just going to throw this on us as a tip of the week.
I'm going to, because anybody else out there who runs across this will probably be like, "Oh, hallelujah!" Right?
Yeah, their brains are melting too.
So if you have the misfortune of working with cubes and MDX, and you have to look at dimensions and things like this, ran across a thing to where I get this query from somebody, an MDX query, that has these dimensions in it that I can't see in the cube browser in SSMS, Management Studio. And it just stumped, right? Like, there's magic here, and I don't know what this magic is. The answer is to get data tools. I forget what it was. It was
Oh man, you don't even
business intelligence data tools for Visual Studio. And if you install that, you can then open up an analysis services database within Visual Studio, and you'll have access to everything. Now,
well, basically at that point, you're looking at what it takes
The
to build
metadata.
build the cube.
yeah, so
For
you can
clarity,
see all
though,
of them.
So for those who aren't familiar with it, MDX is a multidimensional. Well, I don't even know what the X stands for. Query?
X-ray. I don't know.
No, I forget what the X stands for, but it's a multidimensional query language.
Yeah, and it's disgusting. It's gross.
And if you wonder, like, what's a multidimensional query language? Excel.
Yeah, seriously, we're not going to go
Open
deep
up
into it.
open up Microsoft Excel, and now imagine, you have your table as your worksheet, but then there are multiple worksheets within
multiple
that file.
tabs. You could have multiple workspaces or workbooks, is what they call it.
Right.
And you could have multiple Excel files, and they could reference other ones. Like it's truly a 4D space. But the key here is, if you're not able to see all the dimensions that you think you should, if you open up the cube inside Visual Studio using that plugin, then you will be able to see all the dimensions and everything else that went into building that cube.
And there was a trick too with this plugin that you should probably mention, which is if you already have, well, you probably already have SQL Server tools installed, but during the install, it's going to bring up your standard looking SQL Server install GUI, and it's going to prompt you, hey, do you want to install any kind of add-ons to an existing instance, or do you want to create a new instance? And you're going to be tempted to say, hey, I just want to add on to an existing instance, and because all I want to be able to do is add in this ability to view cubes. But that's not going to work.
Yeah.
You'll need to specify a new instance, and even though it sounds like it's going to create a new instance, it's actually not.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's complete garbage for a UI for installing.
I think that's just the cost of reusing the
regular installer.
Yeah.
But pretty cool information. Frustrating that you have to find out that way, but hey.
Yeah.
Oh! I have one other tip.
Okay.
Only because he has now witnessed the greatness that it is. A 34-inch ultra-wide monitor. What is your take, Outlaw?
I don't know what he's talking about.
Wait, I think he's going to try and steal it tonight.
What? You don't even have one yet.
He's going to get clubbed on the way out the door.
You don't even have one yet. I don't know what you're talking about. You keep talking about wanting to buy one because you're jealous of mine.
It's amazing, right?
You're just jealous of mine.
Hey, what did you do when you sat down with Visual Studio on that thing?
Well, I did what any self-respecting developer would do, and I started tearing off tabs.
Yeah, I saw you started nesting. Started setting up your own little bat cave.
Dude, he had 4 vertical tab groups on that monitor.
Man, it's a beautiful thing.
I've never seen someone have so much fun setting up vertical tabs. He's like, look, I'm going to add a third. Now I'm going to take away. I'll put 2 more up.
True story. I don't know why.
I'm calling you out.
Hey, I'm telling you guys right now, we're gonna put another. I'm gonna link to it again in the show notes, or somebody's going to. That monitor is glorious. Like, there's no other word for it. It is.
It's pretty spectacular. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
Yeah.
if you there's actually I'll include this in the show notes. There was a Life Hacker article where it was talking about should you go multi-monitor or ultra wide monitor, and they made a pretty good case for going single ultra wide.
And you saw it. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, it's. Oh God, it's awesome.
It's pretty spectacular. I'm not gonna lie.
Yep. All right, so that's it.
All right. So we talked about 2 ways that you could possibly deal with hierarchical data, and the adjacency list and the nested set model. And like I said, we're going to be getting into more in future episodes. So we hope you enjoyed this one. And let's see, what are we got here? Oh, no, we need to have a poll. And what should the poll be? Okay, wait, no, you go on. I had an idea for the poll.
Me go on.
Yeah.
That one's a blog post. What was my blog post?
I thought you wrote a blog post talking about this, and that's how this all kind of came to be. But now I'm not so sure.
Well, I did write one about product hierarchies and categories.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and it's actually surprisingly one of our more popular articles on the site, which is shocking.
Yeah.
Because I've given it no love since then. But
So I meant to actually put this in the resources we like section, but apparently it's past my bedtime.
or we don't like it. It's one of the two. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that. So
What about for the poll? How long have you been programming?
oh yeah. So let's do this on episode codingblocks.net/episode 28. If you go there, we're going to have a poll on there, and we're going to ask, how long have you been programming? What's your experience level?
Well, it's either that or another poll option that I had too. You can see I'm having so much fun with these polls. They just keep coming off like poll ideas. Because another one that I had too was that should Joe move back to Atlanta?
I think. Hold on. I think that we need to change this from poll to survey.
Oh, right. Okay. You're feeling a little...
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll stop that right there.
The surveys. Go check out the survey on episode 28, please.
That's...
And subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app.
And be sure to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and more.
Contact us with a question or a topic. Leave your name and preferred method of shout out, website, Twitter, whatever, and we'll be sure to mention you. And visit us at codingblocks.net, where you can find our show notes, examples, discussions, and more.
Send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments@codingblocks.net.
And be sure to follow us on Twitter at CodingBlocks.
And any kind of corny jokes that you have, we appreciate them. Send them to us.
Especially late at night.
Yes, especially late nights at Coding Blocks. Just do it. We have fun with it. So, yeah, that's it. Episode 28 is a wrap.